All right, let's talk about something that's been bugging me since the second the Knicks hoisted that trophy. Everybody wants to celebrate the championship roster, and look, they should. But there's one name buried on that bench that nobody wants to bring up, and honestly, somebody has to say it out loud. That name is Pacome Dadiet. Before you keep watching, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think. And if you're new here, subscribe, because we're breaking down everything happening with this Knicks roster all season long, not just the highlights everyone else covers. So here's the situation. The Knicks are running it back with the exact same starting five that won it all last year. Makes sense, right? Why fix something that isn't broken? Brunson, the whole crew, they've already answered every question a champion needs to answer. Nobody's questioning Josh Hart's motor or whether Mitchell Robinson's replacement, Andre Drummond, at 32 years old, knows how to set a screen and grab a rebound. That's a solved problem. But then you scroll down the bench and you land on Dadiet, and suddenly the vibe changes completely. Let's remember how we got here. This kid was our first-round pick back in 2024, the 25th overall selection. First-round guys are supposed to be building blocks. They're supposed to be the future of the franchise, the guy you point to in 3 years and say, remember when we drafted him? Look at him now. That's the dream every fan has when their team makes a first-round pick. Instead, 2 years later, what do we actually have? A player who's logged a grand total of 47 regular season appearances and 9 playoff minutes across 2 full seasons. 47 games. In 2 years. That's not a rotation player. That's barely a cameo. And look, I get it. Development takes time. Not every prospect is Anthony Edwards falling into your lap. But at some point, the front office and the coaching staff have to look at that number and ask themselves some hard questions. Now here's where it gets a little more complicated, and honestly a little more frustrating for us as fans. This past year with Westchester, the G League squad, Dadiet actually looked good, real good. He was putting up over 23 points a night down there. That's not a throwaway stat line. That's a guy showing flashes of exactly the scoring instincts we hoped he'd bring to the big club. So why isn't that translating? Why does a guy who can drop 23 in the G League turn into an afterthought the second he steps onto the Garden floor with the varsity squad? That's the million-dollar question, and it's the reason he's been named by outside analysts as the Knicks player with the most to prove heading into next season. Not some hot take from a random account either. This is coming from national NBA media covering every single team in the league, and out of our entire championship roster, he's the one guy they flagged. Think about that for a second. Every other Knick on this roster has already proven what they can do on the NBA's biggest stage. Dadiet is the only one still auditioning. And drop a comment below if you actually watched him play meaningful minutes last season, because honestly, a lot of us barely got the chance. Here's my honest, unfiltered opinion. As a fan who's watched this front office operate for years now, the Knicks have a genuinely stacked roster, deep at almost every position. Which sounds great until you realize that depth is exactly why a guy like Dadiet gets buried. There's no incentive for the coaching staff to develop him through mistakes when they can just plug in a veteran who already knows the system. Championship teams don't experiment. They win now. And that mentality, as smart as it is for banner number 2, is potentially costing this kid his entire NBA career before it even really starts. Now let's talk about what's actually at stake here. Because this isn't just about minutes on a stat sheet. This is a business decision looming on the horizon. If Dadiet comes out of training camp and the summer league showing from this past offseason, which by most accounts was underwhelming, if that carries into the regular season and he still can't find consistent minutes, we all know what happens next. He becomes trade bait, or worse, a straight-up salary dump before the trade deadline. And that stings, because think about the value we'd be getting back. A young wing who flashed real scoring ability in the G League, but never got a legitimate runway with a big club, on a team that's too busy chasing back-to-back titles to babysit development? What kind of return does that actually fetch on the trade market? Realistically, not much. We'd basically be giving him away for pennies on the dollar after investing a first-round pick and 2 years of roster space into him. That's the part that genuinely frustrates me as someone who bleeds orange and blue. We use a valuable draft asset on this guy, and if he walks out the door for scraps because we never gave him a real shot, That's on the organization, not just on him. So here's the real question heading into training camp. Does Dadiet finally get his moment? Does Mike Brown carve out real minutes for him on the perimeter? Especially since this roster could genuinely use more consistent shooting and playmaking off the bench? Or does this kid spend one more season glued to the pine while the front office quietly shops him around the league? I want to know what you think, and I mean that. Smash that like button if you're rocking with the Knicks going into next season, and drop a comment telling me straight up, does Dadiet deserve real minutes this year, or is it time to cut ties and move on? I read every single comment, so don't be shy. Before you go, subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications too, because we got a lot more roster breakdowns, trade rumors, and honest fan reactions coming your way as training camp gets closer. This offseason is going to be loaded with storylines, and Dadiet's situation is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle for this championship team trying to defend its title. Let me know down in the comments who else on this roster you think has something to prove this year, because Dadiet might be the headline name, but he's not the only one on thin ice. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.